Chef Andrew here. We're going to be learning how to make beignets today. I'm not going to be doing this by hand. I'm actually going to be using the machine. This is to get you guys to use the machine and practice with it and make sure you know what you're doing before I send you out into the world. So, basic recipe for beignets is pretty simple. You're going to need 1 1/8 teaspoons of active dry yeast. This is about half a packet of yeast if you buy the packets at the store. You're going to need 3/4 cup of warm water. Straight from the tap is fine. About 110 to 115 degrees is perfect. Then you're going to need 1/4 cup of sugar, half a teaspoon of salt, 1 egg, half a cup of evaporated milk, 3 1/2 cups of flour, and 1/4 cup of vegetable shortening. You could use butter, but we want more of a fluffiness than a richness. Shortening will give you a nice fluffiness, butter gives you more of a richness, and we kind of want a nice light and fluffy beignet. Alright, so to start off, we're going to take our warm water here, and we're actually going to throw in our yeast and give it a good stir. And what I like to do is I'm actually going to add just a small amount of sugar, alright, to get it going, and then we're just going to give this a good stir. Alright, make sure all the yeast is touching the water. This is known as blooming the yeast. Alright, sugar is what the yeast feeds off of. That's what creates the carbon dioxide bubbles that the yeast produces as it begins to become active and alive. Okay, this is known as a biological leavening agent rather than a chemical agent like baking soda, baking powder, cream of tartar stuff. Alright, so I'm going to let that sit for at least 2 minutes to get it to nice frothiness that builds up, and then we'll come back. Alright, so the yeast has begun activating. You can see it kind of getting nice and puffy. It's releasing some bubbles. We don't need to activate fully because this is going to be an overnight dough. So we're going to take this and pour it into our mixing bowl here. And then we're going to add our sugar, the rest of it anyways. And again, remember, yeast feeds on sugar. It produces the carbon dioxide from that. And then we're going to add salt. The salt is going to act as a control agent and help slow down the yeast a bit. We're also going to add in our egg. And our evaporated milk. Alright, instead of using the beater attachment at the moment, we're actually going to use a whisk. And this will help us kind of get everything kind of mixed up and started to go. So just give it a good mix. Break up the egg and mixing all the other ingredients. And then from here we're going to add at least 2 cups of our flour first. So let's go ahead and add about half of the flour. And now we're going to fit the machine with a dough hook. Not a paddle and not a balloon whip, okay? So I don't want to see people using paddles, no. Or balloon whips, no. Okay? We're making a yeast dough, and that requires a dough hook. We are not making a cake. Attaching it, bringing it up. And we're going to run this until everything's kind of well combined. It should take about 3 to 4 minutes. And then we're going to stop, and then we'll add our shortening, which is our fat. And then we'll add the rest of the flour. And I'll be back when that's done. Alright, so I have blended this till it's kind of a nice smooth consistency, almost like a thin a waffle batter or muffin batter. Okay. Now from here, we're going to go ahead and add in the rest of our flour. To make that easy, I'm actually going to take out our hook because I don't want to spill the flour everywhere. I want to make sure I get all of it. And we'll just add it directly onto here. And then we'll add in our shortening. I'm going to scrape the bowl because I do want to make sure that it gets nice and aerated a little bit. I'm going to use the dough hook to scrape my paddle here. Don't want to lose anything really. Alright, now we're going to put this back in the machine. Make sure you've secured it, raise it, and then we're going to mix this until we have a nice soft dough. Okay, again, it's a yeast dough, so it should be a little sticky, but it should be just fine to let it sit in a bowl. So we're going to combine this very well using the dough hook and begin the kneading process. All right, it should knead about 3 to 4 minutes on about a 4 to 6 on your machine, and then it should be good to go. It'll be a little sticky, but it shouldn't be gummy or really sticking to the walls of the bowl that much. All right, it should come off pretty easily, but we'll come back as soon as that is done mixing. All right, so the dough has come together into a ball. It only took me about 2.5 minutes. And as you can see, it didn't stick to the bowl. Came out pretty easy. It's tacky without being super sticky like slime. Okay, so I'm going to knead this on the counter. You shouldn't need much flour on your counter to do this part. So I'm going to move this aside. All right, and you're just going to knead this for about 2 more minutes. All right, and kneading is pretty easy. You start with one and you pull it out, bring it over, and you push down. Okay, very simple. Use your fingers to pull it up. Use your palm to push down and kind of start stretching. You're working the gluten here. We don't want to overwork it. So we're not looking for a hard rye bread. We want a nice fluffy texture. And we're just going to do this for, again, just 2 more minutes. If you're unsure of how long you're going to be doing it, I'll get a phone, get a timer, set it for 2 minutes, and then have at it. And when that rings, we are done working with the dough. And I'll be back when that's done. Alright, I'm done. It's nice and smooth. It feels like a firmer pizza dough. Alright, so what we're going to do here is we're just going to put this into a container, airtight, mixing bowl, glass, metal, whatever, and then we're going to wrap it airtight and we're going to put it in the fridge for 24 hours. Alright, and then we'll come back to it. See you in 24 hours. Alright, it's been 24 hours, so I have my dough. I took it out of the fridge for about an hour before I'm actually going to be working with this. So you can just take it off. I'm going to work it up maybe a fourth of it at a time. So I'm just going to divide it and then see where a fourth is and go from there. Alright. Again, it's a yeast dough. Try not to overwork it. Shape it a little bit. Get your rolling pin. And we're going to roll this out to about 1/8 of an inch. Maybe a little thicker than 1/8 of an inch. You shouldn't need flour. It'll be less tacky now and more poofy. And again, I'm not going to overwork this. I don't want to abuse all those bubbles that the yeast produced for us. As you see, it's relatively easy to roll this out. It's not being too difficult. You have to be a little firm though if you want it to stretch. It'll feel almost like Play-Doh at this point. To give you a general idea of how it feels. Just a couple more passes here with my Alright. So when I've got it out to close to 1/8 of an inch, pizza slicer, anything you want to use to cut, I'm going to generally do about 2 inches. Squared. Okay. Doesn't mean you should throw this stuff away. This stuff's really good. Okay. But as you can see, I've got my nice little squares here. Alright, I'm going to finish off the rest of the dough and then I'll come back and I'll show you how to fry these. Alright, so I have my pastries all cut out. So we're going to take these, and depending on the size of the pan or fryer you're going to be using, 1 or 2 at a time. We don't want to crowd it. I'm using a small version of what you guys will be using in class, so I'm only going to use 1 at a time here. And again, remember, you dip it in and slowly put it away from you. You don't want to drop it in there, it'll just splash oil everywhere. You want about 1 to 2 minutes per side. You want a nice brown, golden brown color. And as you see, as it begins cooking, it'll start floating to the top of the oil. That's what we're looking for. If it stays stuck to the bottom, we might have some issues. When that's ready to turn, I'll come back in about 1 to 2 minutes. Alright, so it's puffed up, it's nice and floaty. We're going to take this out and turn it around, and look, that's the beautiful color that we want for these beignets. Okay, we want to make sure both sides look exactly like that before we pull it out. And again, I'll be back in 1 or 2 minutes as I'm pulling that out to show you both sides. And we'll cook a few more. Okay, it's been about 1.5 minutes. I'm going to pull this out. And as you can see, we got a nice, beautiful golden brown all over. Nice clean cuts. Alright. I'm going to cook a few more, and then when we come back, I'll show you how to plate these or make them look like Café du Monde. So now I'm going to show you how to plate this now that I've got a few more fried off. I'm just going to do basically what they do at Café du Monde. They serve it in 3s, and you just take a plate, a small shallow bowl, and so put these in here. Okay, nice and pretty. So we can get a better look inside over here. And then powdered sugar. Simple as that. There's nothing else to this. You take it and you just coat the beignets in as much powdered sugar as you can get on there. And there you have it. Fresh fried French beignets. Enjoy.